Hello. Today I'm going to be doing a video about pincer maneuvers in absolute war. If you look at the BGG forums, it's a topic that comes up fairly often. I know when I was learning it, got a little confused. I think I finally have it down now. And so sometimes it's just useful to try and learn things in different ways. So hopefully this video will be a good supplement to the rules for people trying to learn the system. So with that, let's just go ahead and get started. And the first thing is, let's start with something basic, like why do you even want to do a pincer maneuver? It sounds cool and whatnot, but and what are the risks? So there are two rewards for it and one risk, is the way I think of it. And the first reward is that if you look at the battle results table, it increases your chances of eliminating the defender's target stack. So if you look here, you'll see that everything with the yellow circle with the red arrow in it means that the target stack was eliminated if it's a pincer maneuver. So if you take like the first result here, defender broken, if it weren't a pincer maneuver, the area defenders would retreat 2 zones and then they would get disrupted, but they'd still be on the map. Whereas if you got that result and we're doing a pincer maneuver, the target stack would get eliminated and go to the resource box. So they'd go to the destroyed box. And so then it would take a resource point to bring them back and they're off the map. So there's definitely a big advantage there. Okay, so the second reward for a pincer maneuver is that if it's successful, you get a pocket marker. So let's say there had been an attack here, a pincer attack here, and the units were forced to evacuate, and this unit came in, then you'd get a pocket marker. And a pocket marker is useful because if you're able to hold it through the opponent's player turn, then you'll convert that into a war status point. And war status points are in turn useful because they're used for 2 things. One is determining who gets the initiative, and secondly, certain victory conditions rely on the number of war status points. So those are the rewards. Now let's talk about the risks. And this was actually a rule I realized I'd been overlooking until recently. If you do a pincer attack and you're forced to take a step loss, then you have to take the loss with an armored unit. So, like, for example, it's possible, even if you have a +6 odds, that as the attacker, you may get a bloodbath result. And if that happens, if you don't have a resource to spare, both sides lose 1 step. And yeah, the way the game works is if you, to upgrade a unit, so if this unit were flipped and you want to upgrade it back, it costs you 2 resource points. So it's fairly significant. And also for the Germans early in the game, for the first 5 turns, they're not allowed to upgrade their units. So if you start off the game early and you get a bloodbath and you're not able to spend a resource point to stop the step loss, then the Panzer unit has to take a loss, and it's going to be that way until turn 6 at the earliest. There may be some cards that make an exception for that. And if it weren't a pincer attack, what I typically do is you take the loss with an air unit, because an air unit will only take 1 resource point to come back, and it's not blocked by the upgrade policy. All right, so we've covered the risks and rewards. Now let's move into the details. And actually, I do want to bring up one other thing to keep in mind. So let's talk about unit types for a second. So you see over here, there are mobile units, and then there are armor units are mobile, and then there's mobile units that aren't armor. But in the rules, there's actually a sort of a hybrid type of unit, and it's important to understand that. And those are here's another one. These Soviet tanks have an M that's crossed out at the bottom right. And what that means is that they're not mobile. So these are armored units, but they're not mobile. And when you read the rules, like I have a bad habit of skimming, but you should pay close attention because sometimes it refers to armored units and sometimes it refers to mobile armored units. And you need to keep that in mind. The Soviets, I believe, don't get any. So this is a Soviet unit that's not that up there. That's not a. Sorry, this is a Soviet armored mobile unit, and you aren't eligible to upgrade to those until turn 11. And I don't think, although I could be wrong, that there are any other mobile armored Soviet units. So what that means is for the first 10 game turns, the Soviets cannot do some types of pincer attacks. There is one kind they can do, and we'll get into that. But at any rate, keep that in mind as we go forward. And as you look at the rules, there is a clear distinction between an armored mobile unit and just a plain armored unit. So yeah, let's now that we've clarified that, let's talk about the 3 types of pincer attacks. Here are the 3 types. The first one is done with a major offensive marker. That's one of these, and we'll go through the steps shortly. The second type is done via a mobile exploitation, and the third type is done via an event card. And so because what I was just talking about with the mobile armored units, the Soviets actually won't be able to do the first 2 until turn 11 at the earliest. But they will be able to do pincer attacks via event card. All right, so let's discuss the first type of pincer attack you can do, and that's using a major offensive marker. For describing this type of pincer maneuver, I'm going to go through the steps in a little bit more detail, just because I realize personally there's some stuff I've tended to skip over when I play the game. And so I think it's important to know what the actual steps are and what you shouldn't, how you should handle initiative and so forth. Yeah, so let's assume, this is like a made-up situation, but let's assume that movement is done and it's the Germans' movement phase, and now what happens next is the major offensive phase. And at this point, the German places their major offensive markers. We're going to say they just have 1, and they can optionally flip this for to gain an extra combat point in there, and they spend a resource point to do that. The thing I want to emphasize, and again, this is something I've tended to skip over, is that the major offensive phase is completed before the combat phase starts. And yeah, think of major offensives as something that's, they're planned at the general staff level. It's a major commitment of resources, especially if you add flip the major offensive counter over. And so you can't just, in the middle of battles, decide to move it from one place to another. So I know I've had the bad habit of, I want to try and get one more strength point in the battle. I think I'll flip this after all. So yeah, you should decide in advance where you're going to place your major offensive markers and whether you're going to spend a resource point to gain the extra combat strength point. Yeah, so that's basically the major offensive phase. And let's step through the combat phase of creating a pincer attack. So the first thing you do is you declare the lead stack, the attacking stack, and we're going to attack with this one. So there's the first Panzer, which has a air unit on top of it, and we say it's going to attack this stack in the target area. And that's actually all we do at this point. And it'll become clearer later. We don't actually say it's a pincer maneuver at this point. Because what's next is you play the support markers. And who plays the support markers next is determined by who has the initiative. So in this case, or let's say that the Germans have the initiative. So then the Soviets, as the non-initiative player, place their support markers next. In this case, only one unit could provide support, and we'll go ahead and put a support marker there. This unit doesn't have a yellow asterisk or yellow star, so it can't support it. And then the Germans place their support markers. So they're just going to place one here. And notice, again, we still haven't declared it as a pincer maneuver. That comes later. And then what you do next, I'm not going to play any There's special combat markers you can play. For example, there's General Winner, which only the Soviets have, which adds a strength point when they're attacking. There's some directive markers. And again, you follow the order so that the Soviets would place their markers first, then the Germans. And again, this is assuming the Germans have the initiative. If the Soviets had the initiative, then the Germans would place their support marker first, and that would give the Soviets a chance to decide, is it worth trying to defend here, or maybe I should just keep this unit out of it, but we're just going to leave it there. So it's definitely advantageous to go second when placing your support markers in your cards and so forth. And so just remember to do that in sequence. And then finally, we've got everybody's played all their cards. I didn't play any cards. And their support markers and the special combat markers. And so now you can declare a pincer attack. And so what you do is you add an armor marker to the lead attacking stack, and you put a pincer's marker in the target area. Now, there are certain conditions that have to be met for this to be true. I know they are, so I went ahead and put the armor marker, but let's discuss them. First condition is that the top unit in the attacking stack or in the lead attacking stack has to be a mobile armored unit. So all the German armored units are mobile, and there's an exception that if you have an air unit on top of the armored unit, it's still okay. So that's qualification number one. Qualification number two, I may be listing these in a different order than what the rules list them as, is that you have to attack from at least two zones. So I have this zone and this zone are both attacking, so I meet that qualification. I could attack for more. And quick digression, if you're playing the basic game, which I do enjoy, you actually only have to attack from one zone. Then the third qualification is that the target stack not have an armored unit on top. So we're attacking this stack here, so it's not armored, so that's okay. That means we could not do a pincer attack against this unit, nor could we do a pincer attack against this stack if this were on top, but we could do a pincer maneuver against this stack if it were on the bottom. And is this an optimal layout for the defense? Probably not. Again, I'm just trying to show, or I forget if I mentioned this, but I'm trying to show the mechanics and not the best strategy. But I would point out, I mean, your initial response to this might be just always have this on top, and maybe that works for certain situations. The downside is that this stack cannot provide support because the top unit doesn't have any yellow stars on it. So if they're separated like this, then this unit could support this one over here if it were being attacked. So I mean, but I probably wouldn't have these two units like this on the front line. I might have them in the background, behind the front line to stop a mobile exploitation. But again, we're just demonstrating the mechanics. Okay, so I described three other restrictions, and the fourth restriction is terrain and weather. So I actually didn't even describe the weather, but we're going to say we're in clear weather now. If you look at the terrain effects chart, it tells you when pincer attacks and mobile exploitation are allowed and not allowed. So all the ones with the circle, the red circle with a cross in it, or with a line through it, you couldn't do that. So if this were a mud turn, for example, we could not do a pincer attack this way. You can do it via cards, but we're just talking about major offensives. Pincer attacks through major offensives. And disrupted units can't do them and so forth. So I'm not going to read all of these. You just need to look at the chart. And heads up, this is my printed copy. It's an errata for this sheet. Or if you look at the sheet that's provided with the game, and it unfortunately has says that pincers are allowed in mud, and they're not. So you either need to update the chart or print out a new copy. Okay, so yeah, now we've got the pincer maneuver, and at that point we just draw a card like you normally do. I didn't even calculate the odds, so let's just do that. Why not? So this is 1 for the air unit. We get 4 for the Panzer unit, so that's 5. This unit has 2. We only, because it's supporting from a different area, we only take the yellow stars from the top stack, so that's 7. And then we're getting 1 for that, that's 8. And then the Soviets have 2 here, plus the 1 yellow makes it 5. We draw a card, and it's a +5, so we see we get a defender shattered. So what happens? This unit is eliminated because it was, again, if we look at the result, it's a defender shattered, which normally sends area defenders retreat 2 zones and retreat to shattered box. So this one, well, okay, this one just goes to the destroyed box. This one retreats 2 zones, 1, 2, and then goes to the shattered box. The other, so because that was successful, we get to put a pocket marker there. And then the attacker can advance. That's allowed, or that's what the battle results say you can do. So we'll move this in here, we'll move this in here. And this part's important. So now you can also do mobile exploitation. A unit with a stack with a mobile armored unit that has an armor market can already do a mobile exploitation. And mobile exploitation lets you move 1 zone, and you can move into a zone that has enemy units in it, as long as there aren't already 2 stacks in there. And this is, we're starting to segue into how you do pincer attacks via mobile exploitation. And I do not, because I want to do a pincer attack here, I do not want to put this stack in there, so I'm just going to move it here. And what I'm going to do instead, and I have the attack marker, so I should mark that done. And I'm going to move this, I'm going to put a mobile marker here and move this into there. We'll mark this one done. And then we'll recombine these, and that means we need to spend another attack or support marker. And one thing I missed early when I was learning the game is that you don't need to do a pincer attack to do mobile exploitation. So if this had been a regular attack and there was no pocket marker there, I could still use a mobile marker to do a mobile exploitation into there. And I think I brought in a legacy of other previous war games where you can often only do mobile exploitation or special advances after a blitzkrieg or something like that. So this game's a little different that way. But yeah, I think that's about it. This thing gets flipped to done as well, and we're done with that combat. Yeah, so now I'm going to segue into a pincer attack via mobile exploitation. And I'm going to say these units were like this just to demonstrate a point. And now we're going to go into the details of how you do a pincer attack via mobile exploitation. And it's pretty straightforward. I do want to point out that there's a reason we used an armor marker here and a mobile marker here. So if I had moved these units in different places like this, I would not be able to do a pincer attack via mobile exploitation in this area. And the reason for that is this armor marker indicates that this unit already enabled a pincer attack once this player turn, and a unit is not able to enable more than 1 pincer attack per turn. And the way you keep track of that is with the armor marker. So we'll move this back, we'll put that there. And Yeah, so the requirement for a pincer attack via mobile exploitation is pretty straightforward. If you have a stack with a mobile marker on it in a contested area, you can do a pincer attack there. And you don't need to meet any of the other requirements. It doesn't matter if this were an armored unit. It doesn't matter if you're only attacking from one zone. It doesn't matter if the top unit in your lead attacking stack is mobile armored or not. So I could do a pincer attack this way, but I mean, realistically, I'd want to do it this way because here I've got, if I have this on top, I would have 4 strength points, and if I have it this way, I'd have 3 plus 2, I'd have 5 strength points. But yeah, essentially, we've met all the requirements, and so if we were doing want to do a pincer maneuver, we'd go through the same steps. I'm not going to repeat them all here, but we'd end up in a situation where you'd have, we actually don't need the armor marker there. Yeah, this would essentially be it here. All right, so one thing to be aware of, I've seen a little bit of confusion on this, is that this unit here, although it's enabling the pincer attack, it's not actually participating in it in terms of contributing combat points or taking losses or anything like that. So if we carried out this combat, it would be, we were just talking about it, 3 plus 2 is 5 to 3, so it would be a plus 2. Again, this is not optimal strategy, and I would, if I were playing this, I don't know that I would actually do that attack at a plus 2. It seems a little risky to me, depending on the situation and so forth. But again, we're just demonstrating the mechanics. Yeah, so at that point, you can just go ahead and resolve the attack. So it's if we draw, let's just show the same card. So it's a plus 2, it would be a bloodbath. And yeah, that's not great. And if the Germans had a resource point, they'd probably take that in lieu of losing a step. Otherwise, as we were talking about earlier, an armored unit has to take the loss. And so the 3rd Panzer would have to take a loss here, and then this unit would be eliminated because it's just a 1-step unit. But let's say the attack were successful, then this unit can advance into here, and if we had another mobile marker, we could in turn advance, somewhere else. And this one's probably a little trickier to do, but in theory, if there were another area where where there was a Soviet unit that we had German units next to, it could enable yet a 3rd pincer attack. But that's a little difficult to pull off, but not necessarily. Depending how the line's set up and so forth. And the reason it could do that is because this unit was the one that enabled the pincer attack. This one participated in it, but it didn't actually enable it, and so it's in turn able to enable another pincer attack. All right, I think that's it for these kind of attacks. Yeah, so the last thing I want to show is how you do the pincer attacks via an event card. And both the Germans and the Soviets have event cards of this type. Here's an example, Soviet one, where you can see it says put a pincer's marker in the battle zone if you have a tank. It has a tank icon. And the details of this are actually in the rules towards the end. I sort of missed it the first time I was looking at it. So it's in 22.1, and it says that to play the event, the attacker must have an armored stack, and it doesn't matter if it's mobile or not. So that's why it enables the Soviets to do it as the lead attacker. It needs to have an armor marker on the stack. And you can read the blue box, but the important thing is that that is the only requirement you need to meet. So if we go ahead and set this up, and again, I'm going to skip the whole sequence of doing the pincer. maneuver. We just have like that in a support. Right, I need to place an armor. Yeah, so I mean, that's what we would need to have. And so this would be 2 plus 1 is 3 to 2. It's not, and then the river, depending on the weather. It wouldn't be very great odds, but that's pretty much how you do it. And the interesting thing about the text is about the card is that it doesn't, as I was saying, you don't need to meet the other restrictions. So normally you can't do a pincer maneuver in mud, for example, but if you have one of these cards, you can do a pincer maneuver in mud. Yeah, and also to point out that doing the pincer maneuver does not enable mobile exploitation afterwards. So if this were successful and the Soviets move in here, and this were done during actually, with this unit, the Soviets couldn't advance anyways because this is not a mobile unit. So even though it has an armor marker on the stack, this unit cannot advance an extra zone via mobile exploitation because it's not eligible for mobile exploitation. And the card doesn't override that. The card only specifies whether you can do the pincer attack, but it doesn't cover mobile exploitation. I think that's all I wanted to cover.